Hello, today we're going to be learning about memory. Human memory is a series of active systems that receive, store, organize, alter, and recover information. So first, information is encoded into a usable form. Then the information is stored in our memory system. And then in order for us to use the information we stored in our memory system, the information must be retrieved from our storage in order to be useful. The first step of encoding information goes through the sensory memory. The first, normally unconscious, stage of memory which holds an exact record of incoming information for a few seconds or less. In order for the information to pass to the next stage of the memory system, we need to selectively attend to the specific information in the sensory memory. So we need to actively attend to the information that we hear, for example, that somebody's actually talking to us, if we want to actually record, so to speak, the information that somebody is saying to us. The second stage of the memory system, called short-term memory or working memory. It's the memory system used to hold small amounts of information in our conscious awareness for about a dozen of seconds. Short-term memory is also known as working memory. This is also the place where most of our thinking occurs. If you want information to be prolonged in the short-term memory, you can rehearse it by silently repeating or mentally reviewing the information. Without such rehearsal, the information disappears rapidly. So if you want to memorize the stages of the memory system, you might repeat them to yourself. So sensory memory, short-term memory, sensory memory, short-term memory. By doing that, you're making sure that the information you just saw and heard will transfer from the sensory memory to your short-term memory. Another way to increase the chances of short-term memory to be encoded into long-term memory is via elaborative processing, which means we elaborate on the information we need to remember, but we do so in a meaningful way. So, for example, you add information. If you need to remember somebody's name, for example, if somebody's name is Susan, you will, in order to remember that somebody's name is Susan, you will elaborate on that information. You might be like, all right, so this woman's name is Susan. My previous boss's wife was also called Susan. They share similar facial features. All right, now I'll remember. Short-term memory is also very sensitive for interruption. So remember, when you are asked to dictate a phone number, somebody asks you a question. In the middle of you dictating the phone number, you cannot recall the number or what digit is next. You kind of need to go back and start the process of saying your phone number again. The third stage of the memory system is long-term memory. The memory system used for relatively permanent storage of meaningful information. This system is limitless and does not have a cap. The more we learn, the easier it becomes to learn and add new information to memory. That is why it's important to get education. So long-term memory can be divided into two subsections, declarative and procedural. Procedural memory is long-term memories of conditions, responses, and learned skills, such as typing, driving, swimming, etc. You don't need to think about it. It is more like a motor memory. Declarative memory is the part of the long-term memory containing specific factual information. So knowing that an apple is a fruit, but also a computer company. And there are two types of declarative memory: semantic memory and episodic memory. Semantic is the subpart of declarative memory that records impersonal knowledge about the world. So the types of seasons there are, or that it's January, February, March. That's the order of the months, starting with the first one, for example. While episodic memory is the subpart of declarative memory that records personal experiences that are linked with specific times and places. However, our memory isn't perfect. We can have false memories. False memories are memories that can seem accurate, but actually not. I would like you to pause this lecture right now and go watch the YouTube clip, the TED Talk given by Elizabeth Loftus, and she's the most pronounced researcher on the topic of false memories. And hopefully the TED Talk will give you more information about this element of false memory. Once you're done watching that TED Talk, please resume this lecture. So we have memory, right? But it's important to understand how we can measure memory. There can be two types of memory elements. So explicit memory is a memory that a person is aware of having, a memory that is consciously retrieved. While implicit memory is a memory that the person does not know exists, a memory that is retrieved unconsciously. So for example, knowing where the letters are located even though they might not appear on your keyboard is a type of implicit memory. Many people find that they cannot directly remember a certain information even though they know it. One way to show that an implicit memory exists is to use priming. Priming is facilitating the retrieval of an implicit memory by using cues to activate hidden memories. So I'm going to give you an example right now of priming, and hopefully it works. It should, anyway. So I'm going to show you 4 words, and I would like you to all right, bear with me. So, teacher, school, lecture, study. How would you complete this word? Now look at this list of words. Pirate ship, parrot, sword. How would you complete this word now? Hopefully, if the prime worked, you completed the first instance after seeing and hearing teacher, school, lecture, study, you completed the word book. Because you were primed to think about elements related to teacher, school, lecture, and study. So you thought about a book. However, while presenting with words like pirate ship, parrot, and sword, you were thinking, about pirates, maybe Johnny Depp. So you thought about hook while completing this word. Another very important element of memory is forgetting. And forgetting can be due to the failure of any of the three processes that are involved in successfully remembering: encoding, storage, and retrieval. So encoding failure is the failure to store sufficient information to form a useful memory. So you're not remembering, or you're forgetting a certain information because that information wasn't successfully encoded into your long-term memory. You didn't catch that woman's name when she was introducing herself. You didn't pay attention, so you didn't encode her name. Additional element can be storage failure or memory decay, and it's the fading or weakening of memories assumed to occur when memory traces become weaker. So you encoded the name of that lady, but it has been very long time since you met her, and since then you met a lot of other people, so your memory of her name decayed. You cannot remember it. You forgot it. An additional element of forgetting, it can be the retrieval failure. So you encoded her name and your memory is there, you know her name, but you for some reason in that moment cannot recall it. The whole idea of the tip of the tongue concept, that's here. It's the retrieval failure. And forgetting is a state-dependent learning. So your memory is highly influenced by one's physical state at the time of learning and at the time of retrieval. So whether you remember something or not is dependent on whether when you learned something is similar to the time or the element when you're trying to retrieve it. That's why it's very important to, when you're studying for a certain exam or something, to not, for example, listen to music while doing so. Why? Because you're learning that information in a state dependent on music. So you have the music component associated with your learning. However, when taking the exam or working on the project, I think the exam is a better example. You usually cannot use music. You cannot listen to music while taking an exam. So you're learning, you might not be able to retrieve the information you learned because you don't have that music in the background that you had while learning the information. And another component of forgetting is having amnesia. And one type of amnesia is retrograde amnesia. And it's the loss of memory for events that preceded a head injury or other amnesia-causing event. So anything before the head injury, you will not remember. Another type is the anterograde amnesia, and it's the loss of ability to form or retrieve memories for events that occur after an injury or trauma. Like in the movie 50 First Dates, Drew Barrymore doesn't remember, she doesn't have the ability to obtain, to form new memories past her accident. So she has anterograde amnesia. That's all I have for you for today on memory. Be sure to complete the quiz and post to the discussion board.